I think at this point Nickelodeon is just allergic to allowing any Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series to run for more than 2 seasons, because why is this the second time this has happened? Hey there, I'm Tori Sor, and today I am finally talking about the second season of Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the spin-off series to Mutant Mayhem. I meant to get this video out much closer to when the season dropped, but things got a bit hectic with the holidays and then me going on vacation with my family at the start of the year, so I'm only just now getting around to it. But with that, let's get into discussing the second and unfortunately final season of Tales of the TMNT. Both seasons of Tales are 12 episodes, with season 1 being broken into 2 6-episode arcs, while season 2 is instead broken into 4 3-episode arcs. Although the format of this second season is different, it is still very similar to season 1 in the way that its structure allows for focus on the individual turtles. Each of the turtles got 2 spotlight episodes in season 1, one for each arc, where season 2 has instead centered each of its 4 arcs on one of the turtles. The first of these arcs highlights Raphael in Mutant Battle Arena, the second revolves around Donatello discovering a secret lab on Staten Island, the third arc showcases Leonardo deciding to become a superhero vigilante and facing a cat mutant supervillain, and the final arc spotlights Michelangelo and his friendship with Rod leading the turtles into some harrowing situations. In my season 1 review, I went episode by episode since the arcs were both longer and broken into the individual turtle adventures within the context of the main story. However, for season 2, I'm mostly gonna go arc by arc since the way that they're structured is much more serialized, and each episode flows pretty directly into the next. Context aside, let's get started with discussing Raph's Tale, Mutant Battle Arena. Similarly to the first episode of the Pearl arc in season 1, Raph is struggling with his anger and thirst for violence and with the way his brothers don't understand him, and so his trainer invites him to an underground mutant fighting ring run by the Purple Dragons. Raph, being the oblivious meathead that he is, thinks this means the dragons have gone straight and has the time of his life fighting in the Mutant Battle Arena without realizing that the mutanimals fighting with him are being mind-controlled. Eventually, Raph realizes the truth of the situation and fights all of his mind-controlled friends and family, including his brothers, setting them free from the mind control and saving the day. The first thing I absolutely adored about this arc is the return of the Purple Dragons. I really enjoyed their appearances in season 1, but having an arc entirely dedicated to them was delightful, especially getting to see Kitsune showcased more prominently. And I don't know if it's just me, but Kitsune reminds me a lot of Big Mama from Rise of the TMNT. Obviously, Kitsune isn't a giant spider lady, nor does she speak in the whimsical way that Big Mama does, but her color palette is the same. She's primarily featured running a battle arena, and there is a little moment at the start of episode 2 when during her little villain speech, it pans to a fly being trapped in a spider's web, representing Raph falling into the dragon's trap. Again, maybe I'm just reading too much into coincidences, but I think Big Mama and Kitsune are both really fun characters, and these parallels stood out to me. I also love Angel in this series. She's one of those characters from this franchise that I wish was showcased more. She's generally enjoyable in the 2003 series, and in my mind, Kendra from Rise of the TMNT is an adaptation of her as well, but Tails' Angel I think is the most grounded interpretation. I prefer when Angel at least starts off as an antagonist. In 2003 in IDW, Angel don't fill that role, while Kendra is sort of cartoonishly evil, whereas Angel from Tails strikes a nice balance of being primarily antagonistic while still feeling like a believable character with concrete motivations through her loyalty to the dragons, paired with a fun, sarcastic personality.
This is just a wholesome underground fighting arena that the police can never know about.
In general, I think the Purple Dragons from Tails are my favorite interpretation of the gang. The biggest thing I prefer from the 2003 series, for example, is Hun's characterization. Hun is a fantastic antagonist in 2003, and Tails' Hun is so drastically different. However, I think Tails' Hun is a very compelling character in the way he's used to parallel Raphael's struggles, as well as the inner conflict with his morals running contradictory to his family that is the Purple Dragons. There are a few great moments in the Mutant Battle Arena arc in particular that showcase this very effectively. Kitsune gives a speech to Raphael with Hun in the room and emphasizes,
"We are your family,"
which is very clearly meant to be a threat directed at Hun, who had almost let slip that the mutanimals are being mind-controlled. And in the last episode of the arc, Hun pretends Pete is trying to escape in order to set him free, which is not only a really sweet representation of Hun's values, but the way he has to put on a show in order to rebel against his family that he cannot afford to blatantly disobey. So although I do prefer 2003 Hun's characterization, I think Tails' Hun is still a very fun and compelling interpretation. And leagues better than 2012 Hun. I hate what they did with him in that series. One of the big hindrances with this series is the limitation of the voice cast due to Mutant Mayhem having a celebrity cast. And as much as it is frustrating that it means certain characters will not be substantially explored outside of the films, I think the ways in which they have combated this issue in the series so far have been fairly clever. For example, Bebop, Rocksteady, and Mondo Gecko were prominently featured in this arc despite not speaking since they were being mind-controlled. And although that obviously comes with certain limitations, I think their characterization was still explored in some clever ways. The way that the turtles talk about Bebop and Rocksteady in comparison to the way they are while being mind-controlled provide some insight into how they are normally.
Does anyone else think that Rocksteady and Bebop were acting a little weird?
No.
This is exactly how they act.
And Mondo Gecko, despite being mind-controlled, showcases elements of his personality, such as fighting by hugging. In the last episode, when all of the mutants are gearing up to fight Raph, instead of readying a weapon, Mondo just hugs himself, which is so funny to me. Of the 4 arcs in Season 2, Mutant Battle Arena is probably my favorite and also the most focused on the individual turtle it's centered around. This is a Raphael story through and through, and I adore the little moments that showcase how much he truly loves and cherishes his brothers. In episode 2, when Raph catches Mikey following him, his initial reaction before realizing why Mikey is there is amusement.
Mikey, what are you... Are you following me?
In that brief moment before realizing Mikey is following him, he's entertained by seeing his brother just being himself, which is super sweet. When his brothers are mad at him for being blinded by his thirst for violence and stop talking to him, Raph calls out to them.
You still there, right? Guys?
It's genuinely such an effective communication of how Raph puts on this front of not needing or caring about anyone but himself, but he truly does value his family. In the last episode, when he's fighting off everyone that's mind-controlled and he body slams Donnie, he stops to ask if he's okay, which is super sweet.
No! Donnie! Oh, Donnie, I'm sorry. Are you okay?
Outside of his relationship with his family, this arc does a great job of exploring Raph's anger and violent tendencies. Like I mentioned before, we do get a taste of this in episode 7 of season 1, but this arc goes a lot more into depth with it.
They act like me wanting to fight all the time is a bad thing. Like, is this all my fault? Like, do you think fighting is bad?
On top of this, exploring Raph in this way paved the way for a lot of great bits. At the end of episode 1, Raph is crashing the fuck out and throwing and breaking things, but pauses to carefully put on his gloves before continuing his tirade.
And just bring it around, and nice.
I also love the callback to the 1987 series intro by having the words cool and rude next to the drawing of him, allowing him into the battle arena. There's a really fun compilation in episode 2 showing Raph's escapades in the arena that plays under copyright neutral Mr. Blue Sky, which is so fun and silly. The way Raph saves the day by beating the ever-loving shit out of the mind control case is also hilarious and the perfect way to end this arc. I also really enjoy how much this arc emphasizes that Raph is not smart. In other versions of TMNT, the 2012 series in particular, Michelangelo is the one that is poked fun at for being unintelligent, which is very often overplayed and gets old pretty quickly. However, Tales not only shifting that characterization to Raph, but also making it a tertiary aspect of his personality is a very welcome change of pace. Rise of the TMNT also did this, but Tales Raph's personality is much more in line with his typical characterization, which makes him a more enjoyable version of the character, at least for me.
I never get proper respect for my brains. So when do I get to fight?
In general, Tales of the TMNT Raph is easily one of the best Raphaels in the franchise because of how well-rounded his characterization is while still very much highlighting the typical Raphael archetype. I almost made a comment about how Mikey in the series could never, but I actually warmed up to Mikey a lot in this season, and I have a lot of thoughts on him that I will be saving for later because I did actually really enjoy him here. Speaking of Mikey, I loved the inclusion of the iconic trench coat and hat disguise that we see in the 1987 series and 1990 film, and he absolutely rocks that look, by the way. And on the topic of outfits, the way I screamed when seeing Mikey in that fucking Last Ronin outfit, I love when the more lighthearted series make references to The Last Ronin because it is so extremely different in tone. Saturday Morning Adventures, the comic continuation of the 1987 series, also put Mikey in the Last Ronin outfit, which elicited a very similar reaction from me. Outside of this obvious reference outfit, the other outfits that the turtles wear in the battle arena go so hard, Raph's especially. Tales of the TMNT knows the value of a good wardrobe, and this isn't even the best example of it. Overall, the Mutant Battle Arena arc is fantastic, and though I still think Night of the Mechazoids outshines it a bit, it is a very close second for my favorite arc in the series. Donatello's tale, The Island, follows the turtles investigating a mysterious fifth turtle that attacked Raphael, who demutates in an explosion of ooze before they can get answers out of him. They discover a seemingly abandoned lab on Staten Island and come across 4 more of these exploding mutants before meeting their maker, Dr. Jordan Perry, a scientist driven mad by his insatiable desire to win the Nobel Prize. Perry's horrifying mutant Omega is released alongside the rest of his many other unstable mutants, and the turtles manage to escape the lab before the Mega Mutant explodes and destroys it. The biggest thing that stands out from this arc is the way it pays homage to Turtlemania and Secret of the Ooze specifically. Outside of Mutant Omega, there are 5 mutants featured: Tokka, Rahzar, Anthrax, Worm, and Scaletail. I made a TikTok when the season 2 trailer dropped talking about how much I appreciate the way Tales of the TMNT has introduced a mix of old and new mutants from throughout the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise and mistakenly labeled Scaletail as a new character. However, he, alongside Anthrax and Worm, originated from the 90s Playmates toy line, but is the only of the 3 that had not been previously previously adapted into a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series, which is why I got mixed up. Tokka and Rahzar, as well as Dr. Perry, were created for the 1991 live-action film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze. These three characters were all created as a result of some funky rights issues where the filmmakers weren't allowed to touch any characters that were originally from the 1987 cartoon, but they had free reign to adapt from the comics and create new characters. Because of this, Tokka and Rahzar were created to be the Bebop and Rocksteady of Secret of the Ooze, and ironically were later adapted into the cartoon as well. I really enjoyed Tails' interpretation of Tokka and Rahzar, and I think they are by far the best version we've ever gotten of these characters. In both Secret of the Ooze and the IDW comic continuity, the whole bit with them is that they are big and strong but still just babies, and their youth and lack of intelligence leads to shenanigans, such as Shredder and Karai respectively struggling with the role of mama that's been thrust upon them. I've never enjoyed this characterization. I do think it is somewhat endearing in the IDW comics, but it's not my favorite. The 2012 series has also technically adapted Tokka and Rahzar, but only really by name. Rahzar is the name Michelangelo gives Bradford when he mutates a second time and is no longer referred to as Dog Pound, and Tokka is a completely unrelated giant alien turtle. Calling them Tokka and Rahzar just feels incorrect because of this. We also got Tokka and Rahzar cameos in the 2003 universe via Turtles Forever, but they weren't anything more than background mutants. Like I mentioned earlier, the 1987 series introduced their own versions of Tokka and Rahzar, who are far more intelligent and well-spoken mutants compared to their original counterparts. They were fine characters for the one episode they appeared in, but they don't particularly stand out. Tales of the TMNT, however, took these characters that didn't have a lot going for them and gave them a pretty compelling backstory. Although I have mixed feelings on the whole exploding into ooze bit that the mutants undergo in this arc, their desperation to find stable mutant blood so they no longer have to endure the pain Dr. Perry has put them through for over a decade is a really engaging and heartbreaking motivation. I'm also a huge fan of their designs and voices. It was cool just seeing them in action in these episodes.
They are traitors. The purple one is the smart one.
Personality-wise, they lean more towards the intelligent and eloquent beings that they are in the 1987 series, and Rahzar specifically feels a lot like Bradford from the 2012 series. However, there's a nice little nod to their original characterization as confused babies when we see versions of them first finding consciousness after their mutation, which is a fun little detail. The other character from The Secret of the Ooze, Jordan Perry, is also very different from his original counterpart. In the movie, he's basically just a random TGRI scientist with a British accent that has a bit of banter with the turtles while holding a Bart Simpson glass.
Right on, my man.
I think he's generally enjoyable in Secret of the Ooze, but primarily serves as a plot device to create the retro mutagen that demutates Tokka and Rahzar. Tales of the TMNT takes a very different approach by making him more of a mad scientist. Something I really enjoyed about this arc is how campy it is at times, and Perry's one and only motivation being the Nobel Prize was so fun and silly.
Can you picture it? Me, the toast of the scientific community. And $1 million! My vision board will finally be achieved.
Didn't all of this cost more than...
This characterization is actually quite fascinating because it feels a lot like a typical Baxter Stockman characterization, which is basically what Jordan Perry was originally created to be. Baxter Stockman was originally going to be in Secret of the Ooze, and if I recall correctly, he was also going to be secretly in Utrom. Despite Baxter Stockman being a comic original character, I think because Baxter Stockman in Secret of the Ooze was too similar to his 1987 counterpart, they ended up changing him to be Professor Jordan Perry, and the Utrom plot was also dropped at some point. If you look at the original Jordan Perry, he does very much look like a live-action adaptation of 1987 Stockman, who is very distinct from all other versions of Baxter Stockman since he's, you know, white. And that whole thing ends up being kind of hilarious when you look at the start of episode 6, since it's essentially two versions of Baxter Stockman getting dinner together, especially with Perry obsessing with making better mutants than Stockman like a bitter ex.
You really think my mutants are better than Baxter's?
What?
Baxter Stockman is one of my favorite antagonists in the 2003 series in particular, and him being killed off in the opening minutes of Mutant Mayhem was very disappointing. And even if that hadn't happened, his personality really didn't feel like the Baxter Stockman we know and love. So to have this adaptation of Jordan Perry sort of fill the role of a typical Baxter Stockman was a lot of fun. Speaking of favorite characters of mine from this franchise, we finally got a good adaptation of IRMA after literal decades. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the absolute icon that is IRMA Langenstein, she is April O'Neil's best friend and Channel 6 coworker from the original 1987 series, and is my second favorite character in that series, second only to Shredder, who is my favorite character in the entire franchise. IRMA was first adapted into the Archie comics, which I have yet to read, so I'm not sure how prominent brilliant or how good she is in those comics. She's a background character in the IDW comic continuity along with the rest of the Channel 6 crew, Vernon Fenwick and Byrne Thompson, and in Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, two characters that look similar to April and Irma are shown at a pizza place in Gotham City. However, the only other on-screen adaptation of Irma we've gotten since the original is the absolute hate crime that is 2012 Irma. When I first got into TMNT, I basically worked backwards, starting with the more recent versions of TMNT and then going back in time to some of the earlier versions, which means 2012 Irma was my first introduction to her. First watching the 2012 series, I never really cared about Irma as a character, and the twist that she was Krang subprime was fun, and I still think it makes a compelling story beat. However, after getting to know the absolute gem of a character she's based on, I have nothing but hatred in my heart for 2012 Irma. Without the Krang twist, I don't like this version of Irma because she's kind of annoying and doesn't have much of a personality, which made her friendship with April not particularly compelling, unlike how they are in the 1987 series, where they're literally soulmates. But I hate that they chose to make Irma a twist character because it means she doesn't exist in this universe otherwise and was only created to be a twist, which is absolutely aggravating for me. I've seen some people say that maybe there is a real version of Irma that the suit was based on, which I think is a fun headcanon. However, we know her design was stolen from the Utram Rook, so I think it's a lot less likely. Either way, the only good version of Irma we've ever had, unless Archie Irma is iconic as well, is her original counterpart. Fortunately, Tales of the TMNT changed that. Irma is Donatello's classmate and works with him and their other friend Ian on the robotics team. Before season 2 of Tales came out, we got to see Irma and Ian in the first issue of the Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic series. In the show, we don't see a lot of Irma. She's mostly featured in the setup for the episode and the robotics competition that Donnie is ditching to investigate the horror show that is Dr. Perry's lab. However, I do think she is pretty fun based on what we have seen. She's a lot more chill compared to 87 Irma, but still has a bit of that sass and sarcasm. There's a fun little moment where she takes Metalhead to the lab in order to help Donnie and absolutely nopes out of there when she realizes it is not at all her scene.
You know, I really like Donnie, but I'm not sure I like him this much.
Also, I recognized her voice immediately. She's played by Shelby Young, who voices characters in a million billion different things. I mostly know her from TikTok. She also plays LaFleur in the next arc, who I will obviously talk about when we get there. Although Tales Irma doesn't stand out as a particularly amazing character, and I wish they did more with her, I think she's pretty enjoyable, and that makes her leagues better than any other attempt to adapt this character in the past few decades. I do think it's pretty funny how Leo makes a comment about it being dangerous to reveal their secret lair to Irma, because Lord knows that proved to be a mistake in a different universe. Turtles! Turtles! I would say I hope to see more of her in the series, but that's obviously not gonna happen. That said, I do think it's possible that she and Ian could be seen in the movies, since they're Donnie's friends from school, which is directly tied into the film's narrative. And unlike most of the other Tales characters, it would be so easy to just throw her into the movie and say, oh, this is Donnie's friend. I don't expect that they're gonna do this, but a girl can dream. I'm glad we got to see Metalhead again through the robotics competition, but it sucks that he's not really a character like he was in season 1. He was such a delightful little guy in the first season of the series, and I was looking forward to potentially seeing more of that, but here he just repeats his lines from the Mechazoid arc and is just treated like another robot, which sucks. And side note, I feel like they shouldn't be allowed to enter him into a robotics competition since his base technology was developed by Josefina Bishop. I could be wrong, I don't know anything about how robotics competitions are run, but I feel like that's gotta be breaking some kind of rule, right? Wingnut, on the other hand, has continued to be an absolute delight. A lot of the time, quirky characters like this can be kind of obnoxious, but I think Wingnut is done really well, and I especially adore how they explore her relationship with Donnie.
We are cute and adorable. Me especially. They want to take my blood.
There's a really good bit where she's called stable because of the mutagen that created her, but she takes it as meaning emotionally stable.
A lot of people tell me I can actually be quite unhinged at times, but I think it's just
He means you don't explode into a bunch of ooze.
Oh.
In general, since most of the other mutanimals aren't prominently featured in Tales of the TMNT, Wingnut and Leatherhead to some extent absolutely carry the supporting cast of this show, and it's really fun to see them outside of their role in the movie ensemble. Just as the Mutant Battle Arena arc revolved around Raphael, the Island arc revolves around Donatello. One very nice change of pace I appreciated from this arc in particular is the way that they emphasize that Donnie is smart and has a lot of robotics knowledge, but that doesn't make him some insane super genius that can do advanced biology in order to stabilize the other mutanimals' mutations.
Just because he wears glasses doesn't mean he can do super science stuff. He's only 15, and that's unrealistic.
In all other versions of TMNT, there's nothing wrong with Donatello being unreasonably intelligent and knowledgeable about various sciences. It's a show about Mutant Ninja Turtles, for God's sakes. We can suspend our disbelief to allow Donnie to fulfill that genius archetype. I mean, who else is going to create all of the inventions that Playmates is going to sell as toys later? Oh, what's that? Really, after almost 40 years. Wow. Okay, I'm getting news that Viacom is not renewing their Playmates license for 2027, so scratch that last part. But when it comes to Donatello, using him to come up with whatever genius solution they need is perfectly fine. However, choosing to deliberately call out that Donnie is very smart and has advanced robotics knowledge like we see in the Night of the Mechazoids arc, while making it clear that it's his specialty as opposed to a small part of a vast arsenal of knowledge is a very nice change of pace.
This is advanced biology and genetics. I'm more of a robotics guy.
Part of why I enjoy this change so much is also how it highlights Donnie's frustrations with his brothers, not understanding or caring about his interests, and expecting him to be able to do anything.
Just, like, hack the watch and tell us who the owner is, what he wants, where his hideout is.
It's just a watch, like for telling time. I can't hack this.
We believe in you.
It doesn't work like that. This isn't Mission Impossible.
This also relates to a really sweet scene in episode 6 where Leo, Raph, and Mikey make references to various movies and shows Donnie's shown them, and he lights up knowing they cared to some degree.
Are you guys actually nerding out right now? We don't have time or... Wait, you remember all the stuff that I showed you?
This perfectly captures the feeling of friends or family retaining the knowledge or making references to the pieces of media that you enjoy. Like, I yap about the Ninja Turtles and Miraculous Ladybug and other shows and pieces of media that I enjoy all the time, and I don't really expect my family to really latch on or listen to what I'm talking about, but occasionally one of them will reference one of my favorite shows or games, and there is no better feeling. Outside of all of the fun character choices, I found this arc to be pretty enjoyable. As I mentioned earlier, the narrative of these same mutants being mutated and demutated over and over again is pretty compelling and quite sad. However, it does bother me logistically. Like, does Perry just have an endless supply of these specific animals that he's been mutating over and over? Obviously, ants and worms are no big deal, but the other three, Rahzar especially, would be kind of a lot to just have on hand. Not to mention expensive, but that's kind of the whole bit that Perry has wasted so much money on trying to get a Nobel Prize, which is only $1 million. On top of just needing an endless supply of animals to mutate, what happens to the ones that demutate? Are there just hundreds of turtles and snakes and wolves just roaming around New York now? Like, there's gotta be a notable difference with how frequently these mutants are exploding, right? Unless Perry is just recycling the same batch of a dozen or so animals to make these mutants, which I think would make more sense, but also makes the story that much more tragic. In this scenario, presumably every time they mutate and demutate, they lose their memories of the previous mutation, and that's really sad. Whatever the logistics of this operation are don't really matter. It's just something that was bothering me while I was watching this arc. I still think it's a pretty compelling story and interesting way to explore the existence of other mutants. Another thing that somewhat bothered me was Donnie manipulating the good versions of Tokka and Rahzar by saying,
I'm your best friend.
These poor mutants have been manipulated for their entire existence, and preying on them for personal gain, even if it is for the greater good, really just rubbed me the wrong way, especially with them clearly having unreasonable bias towards Donatello.
Thank you. Best and coolest of the turtles.
Seriously.
Again, it's to help them not die or whatever, so it's not that big of a deal, but it still did kind of bother me. I do think the good Tokka and Rahzar are a lot of fun, and I think it's so silly and camp the way that they're wearing glasses like Donnie. I really enjoyed the island arc, and despite the fact that I yapped about it for twice as long, I still prefer the Mutant Battle Arena arc, largely because I just love the purple dragon so much. But the island was still a lot of fun, especially when it came to its character choices. The third arc of this season, Rise of the Night Ninja, follows Leonardo and his brothers taking up the mantle as vigilante heroes called the Night Ninja, who first take down a dog kidnapping operation before facing 4 mutant fleas and a mutant cat called Scratch, who seeks to take revenge by turning all of the dogs in New York against their masters and by targeting Splinter, the rat responsible for scratching out his eye. From all of the trailers and promotional material we saw prior to this season's release, I was most excited for this arc. However, it is unfortunately my least favorite of the 4. But before we get into my issues with the arc, I want to talk about the things that I did really enjoy. The number one thing is these absolutely stunning Night Ninja outfits. All 4 of them look so freaking cool. I'm such a sucker for an all-black uniform with one bright accent color, and they absolutely nailed that look here. Although this arc unfortunately focused the least on the turtle whose tail it is, it continued to do a great job of highlighting what a complete and utter dork Leo is. I'll save some of the random specific examples for my discussion of the turtle's characterization in the season as a whole, but in the Night Ninja arc in particular, it's a lot of him putting on the Batman voice and trying to sound cool and intimidating, which is absolutely adorable.
This is justice. No, wait. And vengeance!
That's my
my costume! I mean, my superhero uniform.
The other primary aspect of this arc that I enjoyed was also the main thing I was looking forward to this season, and that is Hob. Sorry, Scratch, the mutant cat that is the BBEG of this arc. Despite being named after another one of the 90s Playmates figures, it's pretty apparent that Scratch in this series is meant to be an adaptation of old Hob from the IDW comic continuity. First of all, Scratch has only one version outside of the original toy, him being part of the Pantheon in Saturday Morning Adventures, in which he is the sort of bumbling second in command to none other than Hob. There is nothing about Tails Scratch that even remotely resembles SMA or Playmate Scratch other than being a mutant cat. He does, however, share some key similarities to old Hob. The main glaring thing is that he's missing an eye and wears an eye patch, which is a staple of old Hob's design. And from the first moment we saw him in season 2, I and a lot of other people assumed this was going to be our first animated version of Hob. Of course, there is one other cat mutant that has an eye patch in this franchise, that being Tiger Claw from the 2012 animated series. However, he's also a tiger, which is very different from an alley cat, which makes the whole eye patch thing more of a coincidence than anything. But other than from a design perspective, Scratch loses his eye in almost the exact same circumstances as Hob. In the IDW comic continuity, Hob comes across Splinter and the turtle sitting in a puddle of ooze, and Hob, being an alley cat looking for a little snack, goes in to sample the turtle buffet before Splinter retaliates and scratches his eye out. Because of this confrontation, Hob comes into contact with a mutagen that obviously results in his mutation. In Tales of the TMNT, Scratch chases down Splinter, who finds himself cornered and scratches out the same eye as Hob before retreating to the place where he finds the turtles in the ooze. Scratch approaches Splinter and the turtles and comes into contact with the same ooze, sees Splinter start mutating, and retreats in fear before he mutates himself. Obviously, it's not an identical scenario, but the circumstances are so extremely similar that I am certain that Scratch was originally created as an adaptation of old Hob. But his name was likely changed to follow the trend set by the Island arc of basing characters off of the original Playmates toy line. I very much consider Tails Scratch as another version of Hob, and to have him finally appear outside of the comics was a delight. I also thought the sequence of Hob trying to kill Splinter, but instead being interrupted by the baby turtles and becoming an impromptu babysitter was so fun and silly. The little drawings of the turtles with Scratch going up on the fridge was a cute little detail, and Leo mimicking Batman as well as Raph posing with the Rock poster was adorable. As much as I adore Hob in the IDW comics for how serious he is as a character, exploring Scratch trying to be like that but being interrupted by toddler shenanigans was a lot of fun. There were also some pretty great bits and gags that came from this arc. After a montage of the Night Ninja doing their thing, Mikey says,
"Well, that's it. It's only been a night and we ended crime."
And April follows up by suggesting they take down Wall Street, which is met with a chorus of complaints by the boys.
I'll tell you who we're gonna take down next. Wall Street. That's where the real criminals are.
At one point, the turtles ask what people think when they see April climb into the sewers in broad daylight, which is such a good question because it's something that's been a staple of the franchise for decades, but it just doesn't come up as an extremely weird thing that April does regularly. I also really enjoy Splinter and Scumbug together. It's such a weird pairing, but they're also somehow adorable. Like, the picture of the two of them dressed up and framed on the wall is so silly and cute, as well as the end of the episode where we see Splinter has been out getting her flowers. And it leads to this bit when the turtles see the tent mysteriously moving.
Why would Dad be in the tent?
Maybe he's napping. He loves naps.
What if it's Scumbug?
Maybe it's Dad and Scumbug.
What is wrong with you?
And unfortunately, that basically concludes everything I enjoyed about this arc because I had a lot of issues with it. By far, the most glaring issue I had with it was the absolutely absurd, nonsensical plot. The first episode centers around the turtles trying to take down a dog napping operation, which they track down to a bunch of florists that are using the flowers as a front for the dog napping, which is a front for weapon smuggling.
How is a front for a crime a front for an even worse crime?
Which I already thought was really stupid and confusing, but at least we know who the antagonists of this arc are, right? Wrong, because apparently that nonsense was just a prerequisite to Scratch's plan to turn the dogs against humans. Okay, great, so now we know his true motivations. Awesome. Wrong again, he actually wants to get revenge on Splinter for scratching his eye out and the turtles for tormenting him when they were babies. I think what they were going for with this is, oh, everything isn't what it seems and the villains have secret motivations, blah blah blah. But the way all of these individual crimes line up just doesn't make sense. Like, what was the point of the dog napping and weapon smuggling other than giving LaFleur a giant laser gun? I'm guessing maybe the whole turning the dogs against the city thing was Scratch getting revenge on the humans because his family abandoned him, but it still doesn't really connect directly. I also think it's possible that these plans not making sense was sort of the point to kind of make a joke out of it, but it wasn't funny at all. It was just annoying to watch. I don't know, there was just way too much going on with this plot. Speaking of too much going on, there were too many antagonists with not enough time dedicated dedicated to each of them. I already talked about Scratch and how I generally enjoy him, and for the most part I think he got enough focus in this arc. However, LaFleur and the Fleesome Four did not get enough focus to really justify their inclusion. Starting with the former, LaFleur was only really relevant in the first episode to set up the stupid dog-napping weapon smuggling plot, which ended up being irrelevant by the end of the arc anyway. And I think she had potential to be a compelling antagonist, but she was just kinda there. Especially because we don't really get an explanation as to how and why she was working with Scratch. It's just something we're expected to accept. I think LaFleur and the Flower Society Club could have worked in this arc if it was a bit longer, but they didn't really make sense in the arc as a whole as it stands currently. The Fleesome Four were also not showcased nearly enough, which sucks, pun intended, because they're such a cool character concept. Scratch having fleas that mutate alongside him and become his henchmen is really fun and clever, and mutant fleas are a cool mutant concept in general with their jumping ability and the whole vampire thing. But they feel a lot like the anemones in the Pearl arc, where they're just background characters that don't contribute much to the narrative. I think what we do see of the fleas was really cool, and like with LaFleur, they would have benefited from this arc being expanded into a 6-episode arc like in season 1. Another nitpick I have is that this is the only arc April appears in this season, and she's just reprising her role from the movie. Obviously, the difference between then and now is they're actually friends at this point, but there's still a lot of that underlying obsession with getting a good story somewhat overshadowing the motivation to do good. I really like April and still found her to be generally enjoyable. However, for her only appearance this whole season to be nothing new and exciting was a disappointment. The Night Ninja arc was generally entertaining, but had too much going on that didn't really make sense. And the convoluted nature of this narrative has made it my least favorite arc in probably the entire series. The fourth and final arc from season 2 of Tales of the TMNT is Michelangelo's Tale, where his friend Rod, disliked by everyone, is kidnapped and he and his brothers try to track down the ones responsible. In the process, they meet his sister Maude, who tries to take their blood to further her scientific research, and Todd, a fitness guru who runs a cult that believes eating mutants will turn them into them. Maude's team at the Null Group is able to make mutagen from one of Leatherhead's scales, which she presents to her dad in order to gain his favor. However, Rod Sr. already has supposed mutagen that he acquired from Rod's kidnappers, which is actually a concoction of sink goop and lime soda. Unsure of which mutagen is the real deal, he drinks both and turns into the horrifying Muckman, which the Turtles and Rod must defeat in order to save Maude and Todd. Before I get into reviewing this arc, when the season first dropped, there was a glitch on Paramount Plus where the descriptive audio would play even if you didn't have it selected. It was only for that one episode and has fortunately been fixed since, but it was a little distracting and it made enjoying that episode a bit difficult the first time around.
He handsprings over a whiteboard, making it spin, hitting a robot's head. The robot stops it. They move on opposite sides of the board. Michelangelo dives away from another robot. One robot decapitates another.
But as far as the arc is concerned, I know a lot of people don't fuck with Rod because he's kind of an obnoxious man-child, which, you know, fair. However, I don't really mind Rod, and I found the exploration of his family and backstory to be pretty compelling. Rod and his siblings are all very similar to one another. Like, none of them are smart. The only real difference between Maude and Todd's success and Rod's lack thereof is he didn't really reap the benefits of Daddy's money and support in the same way, and he was clearly the least favorite child.
She has a PhD in her father being rich.
In the Mechazoid arc from season 1, Rod is pawned off to Bishop and works for her as an intern because his dad doesn't know what else to do with him. And although there may be some degree of Rod being lazier than his brother and sister, that is likely something that developed as a response to being neglected in their favor, which is also why Maude is running a research organization despite knowing nothing about science, and Todd has been able to head a weird mutant cult. Speaking of the Underwood siblings' businesses, both of them lend themselves to some pretty funny bits, like Mikey trying to put on a front of knowing things about science with Maude just doing the exact same thing back to him.
Tell her some science stuff, Mikey.
You know, science. In a general, non-specific sort of way.
As you obviously know, the Null Group is the world's premier research facility creating, things.
Leatherhead's obsession with her zebra was also hilarious, and I love when she points it out to the Turtles and Raph and Donnie say
sick
in completely different tones. I was also overjoyed to see Bishop again. I thought she was so cool in season 1, and seeing her doing work for the EPF in the background was exciting. Unfortunately, we aren't going to see this setup go anywhere because of the series being cancelled, but honestly, I wasn't expecting to see any of Bishop this season, so even this little bit of her in the EPF we got to see was very exciting. I think the main thing I didn't like about this arc was how much the Turtles could not give less of a shit about Rod being kidnapped. Like, obviously they don't like him and find him annoying, which is completely valid, but it's so strange that their mentality is that it's probably for the best that he got kidnapped. Especially coming off the previous arc where they're superheroes, it's such a strange shift.
I know you like him, Mikey, but maybe this is just for the best.
In general, the kidnapping plot is weird and doesn't really make sense. At the end of the last episode, it's written off as Mikey making his improv friends the kidnappers, but in the context of the story, it isn't really resolved properly, nor does it make a lot of sense. But really, that's a minor nitpick. I still thought the story was pretty enjoyable. Funnily enough, my favorite part of this arc was Michelangelo, which if you follow me for a while, I am constantly giving this version of Mikey shit for being the worst version of the character. However, this season actually made me like him as a version of Michelangelo, and I'm strongly reconsidering my stance that he is the worst one in the franchise. My big issue with Mutant Mayhem Mikey is it felt like they were trying to include too many different aspects of his personality without committing meaningfully to any of them, which made his entire personality feel muddled. We were constantly told he was the funny one and great at improv, but we hardly saw it in action. Season 1 of Tales did help make him a bit more enjoyable than he was in Mutant Mayhem, but not by a lot. Season 2, however, did make a huge difference for me personally. Part of why my favorite Michelangelos are my favorite is because they shine in little one-off moments through fun lines and interactions with other characters. Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Michelangelo especially does a phenomenal job of this, and I would argue is probably the best Mikey in the entire franchise because of it. 2003 Michelangelo is still my favorite and is pretty good at this as well, but Batman vs. Mikey is on a different level. The main reason Mutant Mayhem Mikey was boring to me was he hadn't really had any of these moments, outside of the ones that were all 4 of the turtles, and most of the moments he did have weren't endearing or funny like they should be, largely due to how much he relied on reference humor. However, Tales Season 2 did give him a lot of fun moments that I found genuinely endearing. For example, in the Mutant Battle Arena arc, Mikey being the worst spy imaginable and giving Donnie and Leo a big thumbs up and exposing their position was so fun and silly, as well as him taking a pizza break. In the Night Ninja arc, Mikey calls out how great he is at riddles and gives Scratch shit for not actually having a good riddle.
That's not even a riddle!
But when Scratch does actually give them a simple riddle that they fail to solve, he says,
maybe next time don't give us an impossible riddle to solve.
And since the last arc is Mikey's tale, there are a lot more little moments, such as Bishop being the only name on his suspect list, he and Raph having fun jumping on the trampoline together, and a few other fun lines.
We just got kidnapped, genius.
Well, it's the nicest kidnapping ever. There's pillows and everything. Hey, do you guys ever have that thing where, like, you have a friend, but your other friends don't like him because your friend is trying to kidnap you?
This is about Rod, isn't it?
I said a friend. I didn't specify who.
I also really enjoy how much they highlighted Mikey being a theater kid in this season. Like in Mutant Mayhem in Season 1, we were constantly fed the narrative of, oh, he's good at improv, but didn't have a lot that was tangibly related to that. However, there was a lot of great theater kid energy from Mikey in Season 2. Plus, he called out the fact that Rod called his heterochromia anisocoria in Season 1, which really bothered me back when Season 1 came out because it was quite literally plot relevant.
I should be the one with mutant eyes.
You do have mutant eyes, which I looked up, by the way. 2 different colored eyes is called heterochromia, not anisocoria, which is different sized pupils. A lot of people get that confused.
Oh, great. So now on top of all this, I've been living a lie?
But really the biggest thing that stood out to me when it came to Mikey in this arc was the speech he gives in the elevator about wanting to be there for Rod in the same way his brothers are there for him.
So I won't abandon him. Just like you would never abandon me.
It's so sweet and wholesome and genuinely made me tear up a bit. I still think this version of Mikey has a ways to go before I consider him a great version of the character. However, the more I see of him, the more I warm up to him, and I sincerely hope he gets even better in the future. The other 3 turtles also had a lot of really fun and endearing moments throughout the season that continues to make them a great version of these turtles. Starting with Donatello, in the first arc when Raph is acting surprisingly calm because of his supposed therapy, he makes a comment about how they would all probably benefit from therapy.
After all, we've been isolated in a sewer for 15 years. But also, there's no way Raph's going to therapy.
I love how dramatic he is at times, like him posing to send a scared selfie to ask for help in the island arc. As I mentioned earlier with this arc, it's a really nice change of pace that Donnie's genius is limited and attempts to be more realistic, which leads to a fun little bit in the Night Ninja arc.
I hacked into the mainframe and downloaded schematics of the building. We can take control of the security system and tap into their cameras.
What? Really?
No, not really. No one can do stuff like that.
Leonardo is very much just more of him being an absolute dork, and there are a lot of moments that highlight this, mainly when he's trying to look cool and failing miserably.
This is the worst plan ever. I mean, they could be anywhere.
Get up there! We can't let him get away!
Well, if it isn't Fighty McFightface.
What is wrong with you?
Ruin everything.
Outside of trying to look cool, Leo also generally has some fun little moments just being himself.
Oh, hey, purple dragon people. I don't think we've met.
Leonardo?
Wait, You know my secret identity? Maybe just once someone could try to kidnap us because they love and admire us?
No tense or else, please and thank you. Grot's been kidnapped by extremely polite kidnappers.
You don't need to raise your hand.
I saved the best for last, as this season in particular has solidified Raphael as my favorite of the Mutant Mayhem turtles. There are so many great Raph moments in this season, so please enjoy this brief compilation of Raph being iconic.
You! Dude! You guys come here too? Isn't this place awesome? This isn't Godzilla, okay? There's no aliens. This isn't some other dimension version of us. Yes! Don't you slowly stroll away. I've still got questions. What if it's got the toppings that I don't want on it?
You could just take them off.
Are you insane? The flavors seep into the cheese. You can't mess around with that. What is that supposed to be? Like I'm honestly asking. You made that on purpose? Man, those dogs are rough, dude.
Yeah, I got them off the subway floor. I'm just saying, it feels like we could be doing...
Just honk.
Only an idiot honks in a... What? Oh, come on.
Come on!
Our blood,
Dude,
Mikey.
I'm so jazzed up right now. Nice try. I don't even feel it. Ugh. Raph!
But ultimately, the biggest thing that makes these turtles such strong versions is how fantastic their banter is. And the framing devices for each of these stories is a great place to see this banter in action.
Dude, stay on your side.
I'm not on your side, you're on my side.
Okay, Leo, well, your shell and your BO are literally in my face.
Would you just quit it already?
One of my biggest gripes when it comes to this version of the turtles is when people complain that, oh, they don't feel like teenagers because they're so immature. They feel more like 10-year-olds because that is the most incorrect take you can have. I mean, other than hating this version of April because you're racist and fatphobic, but that's a completely different issue. The way the turtles act in Mutant Mayhem is not only a perfect representation of teenage boys, based on my personal experience with having a younger brother who was once a teenager, but it is also a perfect reflection of how siblings act. Now, this is obviously speaking from personal experience, but the silliness and banter that we see with the turtles is so extremely similar to how I interact with my siblings in our 20s. Something about being around the people you grew up with and have known your whole life brings out the immature, ridiculous fun that you don't really see with other people. So anytime I see people calling out the turtles for acting too immature for their age, it's like, A, either you don't remember what teenage boys are like, or B, you don't have siblings that you're super close with, because it is the perfect representation of how those two things can intersect. Tangent aside, this is just one of many examples of the turtles having fun bantering and goofing off with one another, which has been this iteration's strong suit from the beginning.
So all this time that you guys made fun of me about anime and sci-fi and robotics, you actually really liked it?
Nerd.
Not robotics.
Yeah, robots are pretty lame.
Yeah, okay, just go, man.
Seriously? You guys are terrible super ninjas!
Leo, the door was right there.
What? Yeah, we went through the window.
Okay, this whole thing is a wild goose chase. We also owe these guys a new window.
Ready? Okay, now we can go. You thought the kidnapper would just call us? If that's the kidnapper, I'm going to be so annoyed.
It's Rod!
Wait, that's actually worse.
The other thing this iteration has always been great at is its animation, and especially its fight sequences. There isn't really one specific fight from season 2 I want to call out, but throughout the entire season, the fighting is extremely enjoyable to watch and is so well animated, which is something Rise of the TMNT did extremely well also, but unfortunately both shows have since been cancelled. Which brings us to the real tragedy of it all, and that is that a month before Tales Season 2 was released, it was announced that it would no longer be having a 3rd and 4th season. And the announcement of the Playmates license not being renewed also makes a lot of sense, as it is probably related to Tales being cancelled. And it's so tragic because although I did say in my season 1 review that the series was sort of doomed from the start due to its limitations as a spin-off from the movies, I adored this series and it had such fun and fantastic characters and story beats and animation. The sequel movie is still set to release in September of 2027, but this cancellation, as well as the cancellation of the last Ronin movie and the announcement of a new live-action Turtles, has me really nervous for the future of this iteration. But for now, what we have gotten so far is fantastic, and I'm really happy we got to know these turtles so well in the past few years. But that does it for this video. Let me know what y'all thought of Tales Season 2 and which arc was your favorite. I am so sorry it took me this long to get this video out. As of filming this, I am already past when I wanted the video to release. And in classic Tori fashion, I already know this video is going to be longer than I anticipated and is going to take me forever to edit. So I apologize for how late this video is coming out. As I mentioned earlier, it was partially partially due to chaos of the holidays, and then I went on vacation, and then after that, when I was going to be working on this video, I got sick. So thank you so much for your patience, and it feels really good to be back. There will be more YouTube videos coming out very soon, so make sure to subscribe to see those when they come out. Lots of more Turtle Talk, Miraculous Ladybug, and various cartoon chat are coming very soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.